Good evening and welcome to the second day of our 1 week online capacity building program on soft skills for law teachers. We trust you had a productive and enlightening first day and we are thrilled to have you back for another enriching session. Tonight, we will delve into a vital aspect of soft skills on conflict management. To guide us through this subject, we are privileged to have a distinguished speaker with us, Dr. Pratima Dubey. But before we welcome our esteemed guest, I would like to introduce the faculty coordinator for this session, Dr. Rachna Raval. Ma'am is no stranger to the world of education with a profound understanding of the intricate relationship between soft skills and conflict resolution. Ma'am will assist in the coordination of the events, facilitating the question and answer segments, and ensuring a seamless experience for all of us. Now, without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Rachna Raval to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening. Ma'am, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you so much. Very good evening to each and everyone. Welcome to the second day of capacity building program for the law teachers. Today we have Dr. Pratima Dube madam with us, who will share her ideas on conflict management. Conflict management is the important topic considering the nowadays cutthroat competition and zero tolerance environment as well. So, ma'am will definitely share her ideas on that. Ma'am has been serving as an assistant professor of English at Gujarat National Law University, Gandhinagar. Her area of interest are English literature, phonetics, linguistics, and literature as well. Ma'am has vast experience of teaching undergraduates and school students as well. Ma'am has vast experience of research as well. Madam has experiences like conducting and handling examination related affairs, students training for research methodologies. Also, Madam has experience in publications and certain books writing as well. So, not taking much time, I would request Dr. Pratima Dubey Madam to share her views on our today's topic, conflict management. Thank you, Pooja. Madam, the floor is yours.
Okay, a very good evening to everybody. I would.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. I would request Kalpesh sir to switch on the PPT.
Yes, is it visible?
Can everybody see it?
Yes, ma'am. It is visible.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
And how can I scroll through it?
Ma'am, I'll scroll it for you if you don't mind. You just tell me and I'll just do it.
Okay. So can we go to the next slide? I begin by saying that managing conflict is really nothing but a matter of communication. Okay? To begin with, one often thinks that conflicts are bad, but one should always remember a conflict is good or bad depending how you handle it. But one thing is sure, conflicts are inevitable. So long as there are people, there will be conflicts. There will be differences of opinion, there will be different viewpoints, there will be different levels of hegemony in a relationship, and that will lead to conflicts. The problem is, how do you manage those conflicts? Okay, so we will come to that a little later. Shall we go to the next slide? So, as a society, one cannot avoid conflicts because they take place mainly because of scarcity of resources, division of functions and tasks, or even, very importantly, power equations in a relationship. Okay, who has more authority, who is more powerful, who should be listened to, who should raise his or her voice, and different roles and organization of roles in society. All of this leads to conflicts. Any organization, see, conflicts take place in families, conflicts take place between nations, between states, but we shall today confine ourselves mostly to conflicts in organizations. Because if we start talking about states, we will enter into the domain of politics. And I do not want to enter into that domain. So we will restrict ourselves only to conflict between organizations, big or small. Okay? Those can be of any type: public institutions, state owned organizations, or private non profit organizations. Any kind of organization will face conflicts as a daily, shall we say, routine. They are part of a daily routine of any organization, and they may be both internal as well as external. Whatever may be the reason, let us find out what are conflicts and how they may be resolved. Okay, please, next slide, please. Okay, any organization is made up of people. As such, it is a living system. Okay, because it's a living system, you cannot control everything. People interact, there will be interactions, there will be units interacting with each other. Some of them have very clearly defined roles. Some of them do not have clearly defined roles, but they are all interdependent on one another, and they are expected to operate in a structured environment with clearly defined resources. Unfortunately, roles are not always clearly defined. Resources are not always clearly distributed. Within an organization, one is sometimes not very clear about the role one has to play, the authority one has, and the limits to the resources that are available to each one of us. So when that happens, conflict becomes inevitable. It becomes difficult to avoid conflicts. Okay, shall we continue? Next slide, please. So what is a conflict? Let us first.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry?
Hello.
Yes, Kalpesh sir?
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
No, we are not able to hear for last 30 seconds.
Madam, you are available. I mean, we can listen you.
My mic is open, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Now you are audible.
Okay. So when first let us try and understand what is a conflict. Okay. So any kind of friction, disagreement, or discord between individuals or groups, when the beliefs or opinions of one or more members of the group are resisted or become unacceptable to one or more members of within the group or of another group, this friction, disagreement, or discord becomes a conflict. So any opposing ideas or actions of different entities which results in any rivalry or antagonism is a kind of conflict. Okay? Anything that blows up beyond control becomes an uncontrollable conflict. Okay? To give you a recent example that everybody knows, what is happening in Israel is a conflict that has become beyond control. Nobody knows now how to control it, how to stop it. Although people are trying their best to restrain, to stop, but it has become uncontrollable. Okay? Next slide, please. So broadly, just for our convenience, We may classify conflicts into four types. Interpersonal conflicts, which is within two individuals, within a group, any two individuals, if they disagree with each other, it is an interpersonal conflict. It happens when two people hold opinions or responses that are different from one another. At the same time, we also have intrapersonal conflict. It happens all the time within an individual. A person, an individual, may be conflicted in his or her mind about how to respond to a particular situation. It is generally psychological. It involves the individual's thoughts, values, principles, and emotions. Okay? So when our values are tested, it results in an internal conflict. When our principles are challenged, that also can result in a conflict within an individual's mind. An individual's thoughts about a situation may be divergent. An individual may be confused as to how to react to a particular situation. That can also lead to a conflict within an individual. An emotional conflict. There are situations in life when one is not sure whether to be happy or sad or angry. So that is a psychological situation within an individual. Okay, I'm sure everybody has seen the film Guide, and towards the end, towards the climax of the film, there is a situation where the character of the sadhu is conflicted. He doesn't know what course of action to take. That is an example of an internal conflict. Okay? Yes, shall we go to the next slide? Then there are intra-group conflicts, which happens where individuals within a group, it's the same group, but there are a few individuals within the group who do not agree with other individuals within the group. And this incompatibility and misunderstanding leads to an intra-group conflict. Then there are intergroup conflicts that takes place where a misunderstanding within an organization, but among different teams within an organization, leads to an intergroup conflict. For example, an organization will have a sales department, a manufacturing department, a procurement department. And if there is conflict within these different departments, it leads to an intergroup conflict within an organization. If the manufacturing department is asking for certain raw materials, but the procurement department has not procured it for them, and then the management raises questions about why the product is not ready within the certain span of time. And then it becomes difficult to explain for the manufacturing team, the manufacturing department, as to why they could not manufacture it within the stipulated time. It was all because of this intergroup conflict, this miscommunication between different teams, between different departments in an organization. In addition, competition also contributes to the rise of intergroup conflict. Remember, within an organization also, there is fierce competition. Each department is competing against the other department. And this sort of fuels a type of conflict where there is rivalry in resources, rivalries, or there are challenges to the boundaries set up by a group to others who are also trying to establish their own identity as a team. So, when there are challenges to one group or to another group, that leads to rivalry in resources, stretching of boundaries, and pressure from other teams, which leads to intergroup conflict. Okay, shall we go to the next one? In addition to this category, Jern and Mannix have proposed the division of conflicts into three types. According to them, conflicts take place because of three reasons: relationships, tasks, and processes. Relationship conflicts, according to them, stem from interpersonal incompatibilities. Two people who do not agree with each other leads to relationship conflicts. A task conflict is related to disagreements of viewpoints and opinions about a particular task and about the approach to a particular problem. Whereas a process conflict refers to disagreement over the group's approach to the task, its method, and the process that the group adopts. According to Denneyu and Cott, even though relationship conflicts and process conflicts are harmful, they think that task conflicts are found to be beneficial because they encourage diversity of opinion, but care should be taken that a task conflict, instead of helping the organization, does not develop into a process or relationship conflict. Okay, according to Denneyu and Cott, very often task conflicts are beneficial to the organization because they lead to the best way to deal with a particular task. Okay, so although they think that relationship and process conflicts may be harmful, task conflicts may not necessarily be harmful. Okay, shall we go to the next slide? Amazon and Sapienza differentiate between affective and cognitive conflicts. According to them, a cognitive conflict is task-oriented and arises from differences in perspective or judgment. Okay, whereas an affective conflict is emotional and arises from personal differences and disputes. An affective conflict may prove to be harmful, but a cognitive conflict may sometimes lead, because it is task-oriented, may sometimes lead to better solutions to approach a particular task, to manage a particular task, which may in the end benefit the organization. Okay, next slide, please. Some people have divided conflicts into functional conflicts and dysfunctional conflicts. As the name suggests, anything that leads to a better performance, which is beneficial to the organization, is a functional conflict. But any conflict which hinders the development or welfare of an organization is a dysfunctional conflict. Okay? One talks about dysfunctional families. One should also talk about dysfunctional organizations. Okay? An organization that cannot resolve its conflicts may generally be referred to as a dysfunctional organization. Okay? It may take a destructive form, and generally, very often it is found that there is a very thin margin between a functional conflict and a dysfunctional conflict. Very often, a functional conflict may turn into a dysfunctional conflict if the communication between the organization or within the organization has not been resolved properly. If the conflict contributes to a higher performance, then that conflict becomes a functional conflict. Otherwise, if it is detrimental to an organization, then that should be called a dysfunctional conflict. Shall we go to the next slide, please? What is a functional conflict then? 1. Generally, a functional conflict has these four qualities. A functional conflict brings about cohesiveness within group members because they are all aiming towards a group goal. The group goal becomes a priority, and individual goals may be relegated to a secondary position, or it is believed that an individual goal will also be fulfilled if a group goal is fulfilled. Okay, that is one quality. A second characteristic is a functional conflict leads to innovation and creativity because each one is trying to work in such a way that it will benefit the group or the organization. And they try to find ways and means by which the best practice or the best approach that is good for the organization is followed, and this competing spirit leads to the welfare of the organization. Third, conflicts provides a challenging work environment, and such a work environment can be very stimulating for everybody because it enhances opportunities for self-development. Each one, in trying to think of better ways, is becoming more creative, is acting in an innovative way, thinking of innovative ideas and methods, and that often leads to good practices which later become norms in an organization or in a group. Okay, so it is good for the general work environment if a functional conflict leads to a better working environment. And such a work environment enhances work culture. It leads to upgradation of various systems within the environment, and it leads to the growth of the organization. And very often it is found when the organization grows, the individual also grows and learns new things while practicing within a developing, growing, evolving organization. Okay, shall we go to the next slide? A dysfunctional conflict, on the other hand, can turn out to be detrimental and disastrous. Instead of helping people, helping the organization, it can have a deleterious effect on everybody. Okay, they generally have the following characteristics. Dysfunctional conflict is generally one which does not lead to a solution. The conflict remains. On the contrary, it aggravates and no solution is found. And the basic goals of the organization are neglected. People are so obsessed with their differences, with the conflict, that the goals of the organization or of their group are neglected. People are not treated with respect. The climate of the organization is violated. There is distrust and suspicion. People feel depressed, defeated, and demeaned, and which leads to further antagonism, and it only increases the conflict. Such is the nature of a dysfunctional conflict. If it is detrimental to the organization, it is certainly a dysfunctional conflict. Okay? Next slide, please. And such a conflict may lead to absenteeism because people don't like the working environment, they don't like going to office, they don't like going to work, and this may sometimes lead to greater attrition. If a solution is not found, if it is not controlled in time, and people try and find better solutions to instead of working in that organization, they find a better place to work, which is more conducive and which has a more conducive atmosphere. Sometimes when people have to report to dual managers, there is no clear hierarchy where excuse me, where there are more than one centers of power, more than one person enjoys hegemony in an organization. It may create dislike, hatred, and may lead to a dysfunctional conflict. People are not sure who can resolve their problems. Okay, so that is not a desirable situation in any organization. And disagreement with the management may be considered disloyalty. And if that prevails, an opportunity for creativity is lost and employees lose interest. If an employee feels that nobody is interested in the ideas, in the creative ideas that he or she is presenting for the welfare of the organization, employees may feel disheartened and may stop sharing their interesting ideas, their creative ideas, and they lose interest in their job. And this may lead to conflicting situations. So a dysfunctional conflict is certainly not desirable. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So how does one manage conflict? Now that we have a fairly good idea of how conflicts work, let us see how one can resolve conflicts. Okay? Whether the conflicts are within states, within nations, within organizations, between organizations, or between individuals, within families, or between one family and another. We cannot always have a Romeo and Juliet tragedy, okay? Very often, families resolve their conflict in a mature and a very, shall we say, innovative way, which leads to the betterment of both the family and the organization. Okay, so how are conflicts dealt with? Broadly, conflicts are managed in there are at least 5 ways in which conflicts can be managed. Okay, one of them is accommodating, second is avoiding, third is collaborating, fourth is competing, fifth is compromising. Let us take a look at each one of them. Okay, first let us take a look at the accommodating style. This accommodating mode of conflict management is high in cooperation but low in assertiveness. The more important goal is to cooperate, and one of the parties may have to compromise and lower their assertiveness in order to be able to cooperate. They may have to lower their opinion or assertiveness. When a person or a management chooses this style to resolve a conflict, they may have to sacrifice their own needs and desires, their own opinions to that of the other party. Okay? They may suppress their own opinions and desires and needs and and allow the other party to assert their ideas, their opinions, and their needs. Okay? Perhaps this management style may work very well if the conflicts are trivial and it is more important to get on with the job. It is less important to quarrel and just need to move on quickly and get on with the job. If the conflict is trivial, I think this may be a very good style of managing a conflict, where one accommodates the opinion of the other person. If it's not very crucial, if it's very trivial, it's perfectly all right to follow this style. Very often it works at home, within a family, okay, where you or in a hostel, where you accommodate according to your roommate or your partner or your child, where accommodating is more important than proving that you are right. Okay, it's not always important to win an argument. It is probably more important to resolve the relationship rather than win an argument. Okay, so for trivial conflicts, for small conflicts, perhaps this may be a good method. It may be better than asserting a more assertive style of managing a conflict. Okay, shall we go to the next one? Okay, avoiding. One often does that in a family, in a relationship. One avoids, dodges, or bypasses a conflict. Okay? It is low in assertiveness and high in cooperativeness. Okay? One does not assert one's opinion. It is not necessarily productive in handling all these kinds of disputes, because it may feel, the party that is accommodating may feel that you don't care about his or her opinion. Okay, so it may function in a limited way, but in the long run, avoiding conflict or dodging conflict or bypassing a conflict may lead to unresolvable conflicts. It may lead to, shall we say, conflicts that have no solution and may lead to a breaking point. In a family, it may lead to divorces. It may lead to children going away from the home. It may lead to organizations breaking up if left unresolved. Such conflicts can become very troublesome if they are left unresolved. Okay, however, there are certain situations where avoiding a conflict may become a better way to approach the matter. In situations where you need a little time, you need time to think through a disagreement. You may not have a solution immediately, but if given a little time to think, perhaps you may find a solution which is satisfactory to both parties. In that case, avoiding conflict may be the better option. Okay, but it is only temporary. Okay? Avoiding a conflict may also be a better option if the problems that you are dealing with, there are other problems which are more important, which are more pressing, which have more priority. So you want to save your time and energy to resolve the more pressing problems, the problems which need more priority, and you avoid minor problems. So that may be the solution, but again, as I said, it is only a temporary solution. Sometimes what happens is, instead of confronting. Confrontation may not always work, and it may not always be the best solution to a problem. Instead of confrontation, avoiding a problem may have better benefits. If that happens, I think avoiding a problem becomes a better way to circumvent a problem, circumvent a conflict, rather than confrontation. Okay? So, avoiding is one method of managing a conflict. Shall we go to the next slide, please? Then comes collaborating. One would think that collaborating is the best solution to conflict management. Okay? But then a collaborating style of conflict management can function when all parties agree to cooperate and agree to collaborate. It may be an ideal style, but that ideal style can take place only when all parties to a conflict agree to collaborate. Otherwise, such an ideal, such a perfect solution cannot be worked out. If individuals in a dispute come together and agree to find a respectful solution that benefits everybody, then collaborating may be the best conflict management style. Okay, collaboration works very well if there is plenty of time and if all the parties concerned are almost at the same level in a hierarchy. If there is a hierarchy involved, then collaboration may become difficult. Collaborative style may not be possible. It may not be possible to implement a collaborating style of conflict management. Okay? But if it doesn't work, it is better to choose another style of management. Collaborating is an ideal form, a perfect form, but situations are not always ideal. Okay? Shall we go to the next slide? Then comes a competing style, a competitive style of conflict management. Okay? When you come to think of it, it may appear as if it's a dysfunctional style. It may not work. Okay? But let's see if it works in certain situations. A competitive conflict management style is one where you assert your own needs and desires over the needs and desires of others. Your own needs and desires become primary. They take priority over the opinions, the needs, the desires of other people. This style is very high in assertiveness and very low in cooperation. Okay? It is the exact opposite of accommodating. Would this work? It may appear that this style would never work. It may never be acceptable. But sometimes, in order to resolve a conflict, a person who is in a position of power may need to assert his power. And when that person who is higher up in a position of authority asserts his or her authority, then the other people are compelled to resolve their conflicts, their disputes quickly, so that they can start functioning and start being productive. Okay? Although it may appear that a competitive conflict management style does not work in certain situations, it may work and it may be the best style to follow. Where time is short and where a person needs to assert his authority, and see to it that conflict is resolved quickly and people get on with their job. Okay, shall we go to the next one? Then comes a conflict management style, which is called the compromising style. Okay, this is where there is much more of give and take. Assertiveness is more moderate, and cooperation from all parties is greater. Okay, it may seem to be an ideal style, but one finds in real life that not everybody is willing to cooperate. Most of the time, people are too keen on asserting their own opinion and do not want to compromise with their opinion compared to others. But if parties agree to compromise and assert themselves less, then this style of management ensures that everybody's needs and interests are served. Everybody gets a little bit of the pie. Everybody gets something that they want or need. Okay, such a style may be ideal where nobody feels as if they have been let down, and it works very well if the management wants to resolve a conflict within a certain time. One often finds that there is a conflict between the management and labor. Okay, labor has certain demands. Management has denied labor their needs or demands. But when the management and labor sit down together and the management is willing to agree to a few demands, and laborers are also willing to see the management's point of view, such a compromise may lead to a better solution, may be beneficial for the organization, and will help to avoid to manage the conflict very well. Okay, but it is not always, it will work only in a situation where both parties agree to compromise. And such a situation is an ideal situation, and most of the time, situations are not always ideal. Okay, but it can work if some of the parties involved in the conflict are willing to give up some of their assertiveness, some of their needs, and agree to a few of the demands of the other party. A compromise may be the best solution to a particular conflict. Okay, shall we go to the next slide? Okay, so this is a kind of model where on the x-axis you have cooperation and on the y-axis we have assertiveness. Okay, now in the center is compromise. Compromise is where you agree to something, but then you agree to disagree with other things. On the extreme side of assertiveness is fighting. And on the extreme of cooperation is adaptation and collaboration. Okay? Now, it is difficult to say that which is the best style of managing conflict, because situations are different and each situation may require a different style of managing conflict. One cannot say that this style or that style is the best style of managing a conflict. It will all depend upon the circumstances, the situation, the people involved, and the time frame in which the conflict has to be resolved. So all these factors will determine which is the best style to contribute, to adapt. Okay, shall we go to the next slide? Now, specialists say that there is no appropriate or inappropriate style. it is important for managers to assess the situation and decide which is the appropriate style for that conflict. Okay, depending on the parties involved, the status of the parties involves, the values and the time frame involved, that will determine which style is the best style. Nobody can say that this particular style or that particular style is an ideal style, because no conflict is an ideal situation. They all depend upon many factors, which some of the factors can be controlled, some of the factors are uncontrollable, and that will determine which is the better style of avoiding conflict. Okay, shall we go to the next slide? Okay, so how does one choose the right style to manage a conflict? Okay, sometimes it may make sense to avoid, sometimes it may be better to accommodate when one is dealing with minor issues. Sometimes in a critical dispute, it may be better to be more assertive and adopt a competitive conflict management style. But in order to choose which is the best management style, the one who is managing the conflict should ask himself or herself the following questions. And what are they? Next slide, please. First, how important are your needs and wants? What will happen if your needs and wants aren't met? Okay, so the one who is managing the conflict should ask himself or herself this question: are my needs and wants very important? What if they are not met? How important, what is the value of the other person's opinion or needs or wants? Do you value the needs and wants of the other people? How much do you value the needs and wants of the other people? Have you thought about the consequences of confrontation? Have you thought about the consequences of accommodating? Have you thought about the consequences of giving up your own needs and wants? Have you thought about the consequences of asserting your needs and wants? Okay, so anybody who is trying to resolve a conflict should ask this important question: what will happen if I assert my own needs and wants? What are the consequences? He should also ask, what will happen if I do not assert my needs and wants? What are the consequences? So this is the most crucial question, to be able to foresee the consequences of giving up your needs and wants, and the consequences of asserting your needs and wants. Then ask yourself, how crucial is the issue? And do you have the time and energy to address the situation now, right now? Is it important to address the conflict now, right now, or can it wait? Are there other important issues that take precedence over this particular conflict? Tell me, can Israel have waited for 1 month before replying to Hamas's attack? No. In a situation like this, Israel would have had to take a decision immediately. It cannot wait. There are certain conflicts which cannot wait. There are certain conflicts which can be allowed to be addressed a little later. Why? Because there are other situations which gain priority over this particular conflict. The answers to these questions will help the individual to decide which is the most appropriate style in a particular situation and choose which is the best style to manage a particular conflict. No management style is best or ideal because no situation is ideal. So each individual or the one who is managing the conflict shall have to weigh the consequences of following a particular management style, conflict management style, and then choose which is the best style. Okay, shall we go to the next slide? Here we come to the role of communication. As I said in my heading, managing conflict is all a matter of communication. Conflicts are complex because they involve people, and when it involves people, you involve the interaction, you have the interaction of cognitive, psychological, physiological, and contextual dynamics. Each context is different. Each person's physiological response is different. Each person's cognitive response is different. Each person's psychological response is different. And therefore, communication, the best way to communicate is the best way to resolve a conflict. Okay? Most conflict theories take either a psychological or an economic approach to understanding or managing conflict. There was one political leader in India who had a very good method of managing conflict. His name is Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee. He was able to run a coalition government for quite some time only because he was able to, shall we say, communicate with people with, shall we say, diverse on the political opinions. They were on the diverse on different sides of the political spectrum. Yet he managed to bring together a lot of people. Okay, only because of his communication skills. Okay, so communication skills play an important role. They play a very crucial role in a relationship, and they help to establish and maintain cordial relationships between participants in an organization, between employees, between management, between labor, between people at different levels in a hierarchy in an organization. Okay? So this communication, which is a skill, some people are born with it, but others can learn it. This skill in communication can contribute to establishment of fair and efficient relations, a mutual respect, understanding, and acceptance between bosses and subordinates, colleagues, people within the organization, people outside the organization. Okay? So the most crucial thing is that skill in communication. Okay? Shall we go to the next slide? How effective communication is a key. Why do we say effective communication is the key to resolving conflicts? Most conflicts arise because communication was poor initially. Competition for common but scarce resources. Disputes over roles. उसको इतनी सैलरी मिलती है, मेरे को क्यों नहीं मिलती है? Okay, and just plain incompatibility, where people come and tell the boss, I can't work with that person. I don't like the way he functions. Or that person always keeps interfering in my work. I cannot work with such a person. Okay? So sometimes people are incompatible by nature. And they are not willing to accept this fact. And they are not willing to overcome their different approaches. Okay? So conflicts arise in the first place very often because of poor communication. Okay? That is why one says that, or experts say that, communication is one important tool which can help to avoid most conflicts. And lack of communication can be the catalyst that leads people headlong into a conflict. Okay, shall we go to the next slide? According to Christine Switzer, conflict escalation happens in broken communication, false assumptions, and negative commitments, all of which can complicate any conflict which is already complex. A conflict situation is already complex. And if communication breaks down, it only leads to further complication in a conflict situation. However, if there is effective communication, if the communication is successful, then all those barriers which were created, the walls which were created between family members, between individuals, between parties, between departments in an organization, that those walls, those barriers are reduced. There is less anxiety and there is a willingness to look at the other person's point of view. Effective communication starts with putting yourself in the shoes of the other person, seeing things from the perspective of the other person. When one is willing to see any matter from the point of view of the other party, then that is the first step in effective communication. That is the first step in resolving a conflict. And that involves active listening. At least listen, even if you disagree. Okay? And while you are listening, you may ask questions to clarify certain things. And even your attitude on body posture can send a message to the other party that you are ready and willing to resolve conflicts. Okay, so that is the first step. Try and see the other person's point of view. Shall we go to the next slide, please? Now, based on what the conflict is, based on the type of conflict, these are the kinds of communication steps that one needs to take. First one is take feedback. What feedback? Both formal as well as informal. Be willing to listen and see the responses of people. If you get the right feedback, if you keep your mind open and are receptive to the opinions of others, that may be a major step in avoiding a conflict. Okay? Where you listen, you ask question, you perceive the problem of the other person. Okay? So that is the first step. Second step. Next slide, please. Secondly, in an organizational communication, be receptive to both formal and informal communication. Not only in a meeting, which is a formal piece of communication, should one be willing to listen to the other party, but even when one is standing near the coffee pot, near the coffee machine, or while having lunch, if one is willing to listen to the grapevine, sometimes the grapevine can give you important insights into how people are thinking or what is the mindset of people. So I would say that being receptive to both formal and informal styles of communication, both the grapevine as well as the official channels, should be open, and one should have an eye, a ear to the ground to receive signals from both formal and informal pieces of communication. Third, and encourage people to offer their suggestions and complaints. Third, next slide, please. And when one communicates, the first step is listening, of course. But when one talks, be simple. Nothing can communicate well. Nothing can be better than to speak in a simple, clear, direct language. The best things are communicated in a simple, direct way, in a manner that is appropriate to the context, which is concise and which is compact. Don't talk more than is necessary, but talk whatever is necessary. Do convey that. As Churchill used to say, jaw is better than war. It is better to talk than to fight. Okay? So the information that you are communicating should be meaningful to the parties concerned, should be meaningful to the context in which it is communicated, and that will make an impact. People will be willing to listen to your communication if it is meaningful to them, if it makes a difference in their lives. Okay? So you have to ensure that your communication is clear, concise, and contextual. Okay, next please. Next slide please. And then when you deliver, talk in terms of facts. Not only ideas, but facts. Okay? And try and align the organizational goals with individual needs and opinions in such a way that an individual who is part of an organization feels that the greater good of the organization will also fulfill his own individual needs and ambitions. If the organization does well, my opportunity to grow and to achieve something will also be enhanced. Okay, so deliver your message clearly and factually. Not just ideas, but facts. Okay, that can have a profound impact on the minds of employees and gain the trust of all employees. Next slide, please. So, conflict management through effective communication can take place through feedback, a feedback which covers both formal and informal communication, where communication is clear, concise, and contextual, and messages are delivered as facts, where individual goals are in resonance with organizational goals. Shall we go to the next slide, please? So, I would end by saying that diagnosing a conflict is not only a science, it is an art. Okay? It is important to understand the conflict and then find a solution. However, not all conflicts may be understandable and not all conflicts may be resolvable. Okay? There is no one single formula that will work for all kinds of conflicts. Every conflict is complex and a solution, a creative solution has to be found for every kind of conflict. It all starts with first diagnosing the conflict and then finding a solution to the individual conflict. You can resolve the problem only if one understands the problem. Okay, next slide, please. So, the bottom line is all conflicts can be resolved through proper communication. Okay, sometimes the only solution is war. Okay, when Krishna himself went as a messenger to Dhritarashtra's darbar, and when Duryodhan said that I am not willing to give a piece of land that rests on the tip of a needle, then Krishna decided that there is no solution but war. Okay? When all methods of communication fail, then the only solution is go for it. Go for the conflict. Okay? Thank you very much. I'm open to questions. I'll try and resolve them, try and answer questions.
Yeah. Thank you very much, ma'am. I request participant you can unmute your mic and put the question before ma'am. One by one. Smita, over to you.
Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, what exactly is the difference between collaboration and compromise? Is it same, ma'am?
See, as I understand it, compromise is where you give up your own needs and desires. Okay, you are willing to suppress your needs and desires and let the other party assert their opinion, their needs, their desires. A compromise, on the other hand, is where both parties are willing to take two steps. Where you compromise some, they compromise some, and some of the needs and desires of that party, and some of the needs and desires of your party, of you, or that you want, are effectively put forward and asserted. Okay, like a conflict that
Africans no boundaries and where age is just a number. And out of sheer optimism and inner joy of possibilities ahead, I spoke
Please mute your mic.
decided how weekend evening invited Mr. Vinayak from the
Please mute your mic.
and proving an invitation made to the society. I was very hopeful that it will be a houseful show. And guess what? There were
Please mute your
10 participants only. Two of our families and Mr. Vinay. I was totally disheartened. But
any other question, participants? Please unmute and ask, or you raise your hand. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, ma'am, there's a question in the chat box, ma'am. If the other person is not willing to resolve issue and shows professional hierarchy in workplace, what to do in that circumstance?
I told you at the end the situation where that took place in the Mahabharata. You know, one party was not willing to compromise. Krishna tried every method to communicate, to make the other party compromise a little bit. At the end, he said, "You just give them 5 villages." But when Duryodhan said कि मैं एक सुई की नोक पर रखी जाने वाली जमीन भी देना नहीं चाहता, so then there was no other solution but to go to war. है ना? It is a collaborative style can only be possible if both parties are willing to compromise a little bit. Both parties are willing to take 2 steps closer. Okay? If one party is assertive and asserts, no, I am in a position of power, and this is what I say, you will do what I say, then there can be no solution to the conflict. Then you either quietly, meekly accept what the other says, or you go to war. And when such a situation arises, war is the only option, or battle is the only option.
Raja, this is over to you. You can unmute and ask question.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Kalpesh sir, for organizing this wonderful workshop. And it was a very wonderfully curated session by Pratima ma'am. Ma'am, I just have one particular question regarding the almost all of us actually belongs to the legal fraternity. We are law teachers. And then when we talk about this conflict management, many of the time it happens that we have some sort of conflicts with our management or whomsoever who is sitting in a power or in a authority. So then, ma'am, many of the time when that authority is assertive in nature, so it left no option with the employee that whether he is willing to go to war or not, because he may need to compromise with so many other things. So how you would advise to such unsatisfied employees who are in conflict with their management at their institutions?
Yes, it happens in most institutes. That is the reality. You know, sometimes the management is so adamant that it will say, no, this is the management's decision. You have to accept it. So you either meekly accept the decision and get on with your job. It will all depend upon how important your job is to you. If you cannot afford to lose that job, then you just accept what the management says and you keep your job, but you compromise. Okay? But if you think, no, I can get a better position elsewhere, then you first find yourself a better position. And then the only solution for you is to put in your papers. Isn't it? Sometimes
Yes,
you have to take
completely
that.
agree, ma'am. Completely agree, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, that was one advice. Secondly, what advice you would like to give to the institutions? Because many of us may hold certain positions in future where we are sitting in a similar administrative positions, or maybe in future or like that. So what type of suggestion you would like to give those individuals how to resolve those conflicts? Because many of the time it happens with the institution that key personnel of the institution, they are quite assertive. So what type of suggestion you would like to give to them?
See, let us take a hypothetical situation. Let us see you are the registrar or the director of a particular institute. I'm presuming you belong to an academic institution. Okay? Now, as a registrar, somebody comes to you with a problem. Now, as a registrar, the first thing that you need to do is listen to that person's problem. And if possible, resolve the problem in such a way that it harmonizes with the general goal of the organization. It does not come into dispute with the general goal of the organization. If that is not possible, then try and find a solution. Let's say a person has come to you saying that I have to appear for a certain competitive exam. I need a holiday. Okay, can please give me 15 days of holiday. Now that person does not have 15 days of holiday. So what will you do as a registrar?
Ma'am, if it is possible, we can accommodate with some future leaves. If it is cannot be, then just call it straight that this is the position. I cannot allow you leaves more than this
Or
particular.
you can say that you have only so many leave. So please take those leaves. But if you still need 15 days to study, to prepare for a competitive exam, I would suggest, even though it may not be the best thing to do, but is it possible for you? It depends on how you communicate. Instead of saying, no, you cannot do it, nahi ho sakta, can you say, is it possible for you to take leave without pay for 10 days? If you do that, then in future, once you have passed the exam, then probably you can make up for it later. Something like that.
Got it, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
It is the way you approach the problem that makes a difference.
Got it. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. This is the last questions. Reading out from the chat box. Mostly the conflicts are resolved for the particular time period, but again comes again which conflict management to be used in such matters.
See, certain conflicts keep recurring. Because in any organization, problems are a day-to-day business. It's not as if today you solve the problem and tomorrow it will not come up again. Okay? So when you are in a certain position where you have to face conflicts as a regular basis, you have to try and find the solution that will work best for that individual, for you, and for the general organizational goals. Okay? Sometimes you have to say, no, that is not possible because the rules do not permit it. But even that can be said politely, softly, gently, so that the person realizes that this is beyond compromise and he or she will have to accept it. Okay? But when you say it in a very polite and gentle way, the person realizes that it is unavoidable. But if you say the same thing in a rough manner, the person may feel offended. Okay? It depends on how you deal with the conflict. Conflicts are a recurrent feature in any organization. You cannot say, nobody can say, कि आज ये problem solve हो गया तो कल नहीं होगा.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your valuable time. Let me tell all the participants, ma'am is not well. I was talking with ma'am, I think almost 3 weeks back. So she told me she's not well and she's on leave right now. But again, madam, we agreed for this session and it's a very wonderful session. And madam, let me admit first thing, whenever we listen to words, personally, like conflict, we think about negative things. It's negative. But you rightly stated and then quoted some of the author, like it leads to creativity, innovativeness, and then I would say another point like diversity of opinions it creates, not only negative. Hope all the participants will agree with my point of view, and then try to resolve again. A lot of things are there, not a particular way to resolve. Aware about what are the options, what we can do at a particular point of time. So, madam, on behalf of the organizing committee, I am very grateful to you, thankful to you for taking your valuable time and thrown some light with examples how to resolve conflict in our organization. So look forward to sharing them in future events. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, everybody.